think that was our cue.
Yep.
So, um, great background today, right, Joe? Um,
Yep.
I was lucky enough to go do some research about the book Tijuana, Mañana, the Anxious Iguana at the Galapagos. And this is one of the beaches, one of the many beautiful beaches there. And what I remember about this location is that there were adorable sea lions cavorting through the water, four of them. And they were just having the best time in the shallow water, like running or whatever you call that sea lions do, chasing each other and dipping and diving. And they were like the best to
Hmm.
watch. It was really entertaining. So I thought we could start with a summary from last week, just a quick summary, go through that. And then I wanted to spend most of the time talking about how to help kids get from Tijuana Mañana to Tijuana today. How do we get kids to do hard things? And again, for anybody who maybe didn't listen to the first part or even the parts about mission control, a big feelings adventure that we have on the website, your experience as a teacher in the elementary school has been a great asset to your illustrations of the books that we've worked on together.
Yep.
And so I know when I go through the chart, the parents can kind of follow. It's sort of a formula, but of course it varies depending on the child. But it's just a starting place for people to think about how can I help my child go from where Tijuana is in the story, like under the covers in fight or flight mode, to okay, I'm willing to do this. So what I'll do is share my screen and share, just go through the story and very quickly, just as a review, and then we can go through the chart. Okay, so here we go with the front of the book, the beginning of the book. And so even though I made the story about sight words that kids often don't like practicing because they're just hard. But it can really be about anything that's hard for a child to do. And as we mentioned in the previous episode, um, there's a journal that goes along with this. So we're going to talk about ways to help kids get through a difficult task and learn from it and grow from it, but also how to help children um, when they're to understand a little bit more about their brain and why, if you mention doing something hard like sight words or putting your pajamas on, brushing your teeth, any of those things, that they might go into fight or flight. So here's Tijuana he's hiding out, like he's hoping to be as small as he can be and as invisible as possible when his mom mentions that it's time to practice sight words. So she isn't trying to cajole him into anything like, oh, come on, it'll only take a few minutes and then you can go out and play, because that part of your brain that we're calling the upstairs brain in the story doesn't respond to that. The active part is the downstairs brain that's in fight or flight. So she is just acknowledging to him, I see how hard it is. And sort of talking about, yeah, it can feel threatening, like if a Galapagos hawk was ready to eat you up. And so he uh, begins to understand from mom's help that that is the part of the brain that does keep you safe, and its job is to protect you when there truly is a danger, like a hawk chasing an iguana. But in real life, the brain also has an upstairs brain that helps the downstairs brain modulate its response when we realize, oh, it's sight words. I'm not really in a life-threatening situation. But sometimes the downstairs brain is very, very protective, like you can see in the picture that you drew, Joe. And then it's hard for the upstairs brain to get a message down to the downstairs brain saying, actually, it's safe. So we talk about some ways that that can make how the upstairs brain can comfort the downstairs brain. And we talk about some strategies in here and some things that he thinks can make him feel a little calmer, including just being with his mom. but having fun. And his mom sort of says, yeah, having fun, moving your body, working with somebody, those are things your brain does like. So then she goes in and starts talking a little bit more about the upstairs and downstairs brain and how to get the messages from upstairs to downstairs. And then she talks about, well, every time you practice something, it's like making those steps stronger so that it's easier to get those messages down and actually for the child to think, oh, playing this game with sight words is actually fun. I didn't expect that. Or recognizing if it's just at the right level and I've got somebody with me and I am able to manage my emotions and I'm in a place where I can start thinking instead of feeling, then I can do it. And it actually is easier than I would have expected. So he gets to thinking about, like, I have learned a lot of things and I do want to be like the big kids who are reading. That looks like fun. So she helps him think about ways and messages that he can tell himself, I can do that. I can do hard things. And she talks about games as a way that might be fun for him. And then in the end, he is able to read the words because he's calm enough. And then he starts thinking, oh, well, actually, I can do hard things. I'm actually starting to learn to read. And then he says, I'm not Tijuana Mañana. I'm Tijuana today. So he doesn't feel like he has to keep procrastinating. So what I did next was make a chart. So there we go. It's got several steps, and these don't have to be exactly like this, of course, but the idea is first thing for an adult to think about before starting working with a child is the readiness. So as we saw at the beginning with Tijuana hiding under the blanket, there's no way that child is, or Tijuana, any child is ready to start doing anything that requires the upper brain to be online. And so I see this a lot with kids in my social skills groups. Kids will have these fight or flight responses, literally running away or having a meltdown because I'm asking them to do something that to them feels like too much and does feel threatening. What if I get embarrassed? What if I can't do it? We'll talk about a list of things that children sometimes that are thinking about and worrying about that makes them have big reactions or makes them feel like they're not ready for learning. So under here, I have a letter A. So I just made up an activity where to use as an example. So the idea, the thing that we're asking the child to do is in the next column here, work on math facts, which is another thing like sight words. Just memorization, even though you can do games with it, you can use manipulatives, you can do a lot of things to try to make it easier. Still, math facts kind of result in the same kind of reaction from kids the sight words can do, but also, again, other kinds of things. Time to get your shoes on. We're going to be late. Those kind of things that are hard for kids. So the readiness, we can go here and look at A at the top here. And that what you want to look at is how does the child feel? Is this an environment that the child feels safe in, meaning that there's not a lot of noise, there's not a lot of sensory input that's making it difficult for them to attend? And are they with people that they feel can help them? And then another thing that can make a child more ready to do an activity that's a little bit challenging is if they've had some time outdoors, have they had some time to play and have exercise, and did they get good sleep last night? Are they dragging? Are they yawning when you're trying to work with them? You can also look at if they had had any free time. Kids are so busy these days with their schedules that it's hard for them sometimes to even just have that free time to do whatever they want without a deadline, without pressure to, you only have 5 minutes to do that, and not necessarily an end time that they have to be finished by because we got to get out the door to go pick up your brother or whatever it is. And then also, of course, and this is one that most parents think about, being fed. Are they hungry? But also hydration. And then just checking their emotional backpack. How was their day? Like having time before you even start something hard to hear how the day was. Were there disappointments that happened during the day? Did a friend say they didn't want to play with you? Did the teacher ask you to do something that felt uncomfortable for you in the classroom because you weren't prepared for it, or you felt like you weren't ready to answer the question? Or all kinds of big feelings that might happen in a child's day. And then also, there's the question of a balance of, are there too many things in your schedule and there's not time to just, you just feel like you're always on the go. So one way, there are some signs here that somebody can look at and say, oh, these might be things that are making it hard for my child if I see these things happening. So procrastinating, uh, uh, not yet, in a minute, I need 5 minutes, or saying they're tired, which sometimes is just an excuse, but sometimes it's true. They might say that they're bored. They might feel overwhelmed. They don't usually say that word, but tired and bored, they often will say. But overwhelmed, I think that can be a little bit tricky to recognize, I think, certainly by the child, but even sometimes for an adult to see that. And then what a lot of parents tell me about is the child's lying on the floor, rolling around on the floor, and they don't want to get up and do anything. They might be arguing with an adult, or they might just be off task. You get them started, but then they're talking about everything except what they're supposed to be talking about or doing, or they might be looking around or talking about the sound they heard at the house next door or something like that. Um, and similar to that would be diverting attention, like trying to change the topic, like, oh, I want to tell you about what happened at school today. And that avoids doing the task. Complaining about this is too much work, this is taking too long, those kinds of things. Sometimes talking like a baby in a younger voice can indicate that the child is not ready for learning. Making noises is also something I sometimes see. Silliness is also a pretty easily recognized sign that the child's not available for learning right then. And if they say they can't or they don't know how, that's also, well, that one's easy because they tell you. And I think if they're willing to say that, I really like to listen to that and understand a little bit more about what they think is hard and why. And if they're not really working in earnest, they're like, I see lots of different ways, holding the pencil in a funny way or a different way than they usually do, or sitting, the posture in the chair is different than what they usually do. Or they might be whining or saying they're all done or squirming away because they don't want to be there working on the activity, say homework, or they might actually destroy the materials they're working with, rip them up, wad them up into a ball, scribble on them, things like that. But of course, there are more obvious signs than those, which might be actually escaping, running off, or and often in unsafe ways, and then not responding, just not answering, or they might actually be fighting, like that might mean spitting, scratching, choking somebody, punching somebody, pushing someone, slapping, knocking something down, in and even growling. So those are all things that kids do because they don't know how to tell us this seems too hard. So we'll talk about that too. Like, well, what makes it feel like it's too hard for kids? What are some skills that might be lagging? Joe, at school, I'm sure you see some of those things, right? What are some things commonly that you've seen kids do?
A lot of what you have listed here is mostly crying, and
Yeah, I
they're
didn't
just
even put that
fresh.
in.
Yeah, they're just frustrated, and um, you know, it's if they're old enough, I usually just, sit and talk with them and stuff. Sometimes they're kind of unconsolable, and maybe it's like it gets to a point where it's like, well, you're gonna probably have to go, go sit in the office for a little bit and kind of beyond my control, and it's kind of taken away from the rest of the class.
Mhm, mhm,
But yeah, it's working. The younger ones, you can tell where they have to put their, their head and in their hand, and they're like just you can just tell they have like
mm.
little
Body
frowny
language.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? And she, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. I mean, I feel like I'm patient enough with the students where I can just sit with them.
Hmm.
And when I do my IT work, I feel like it's kind of the same thing because it's like, well, I just have to have patience because they're not understanding, this certain aspect of the technology. And the kids are like the same thing. It's just like, I'll sit here with as long as you want. And what's really cool is that the kids just, other kids, they're so innocent and they want to help,
Yeah.
and they're not, um, what's the word? Um, they haven't been affected by society yet. And so they're just pure. And
Yeah.
so they're, so willing, like especially the ones that get it, and they'll say, "Oh, I can help you." It's like, I get it, Mr. Bauman. It's like, I can help them. Are you sure? It's like, oh yeah, I can show them. And it's just awesome. To see
Yeah.
that they're just willing to help one another. But you just have to give them the opportunity. It's like by they offering that, they are showing me like they're taking ownership, and they want to be more than just their student. They want to be a little bit like a teacher too,
Hmm.
and so they
Hmm.
want to help their
Yeah.
like their classmate and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's really cool to see that whole thing kind of work out in class the way it does. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that too. When I ask kids questions about how they can reach out to other kids in the classroom, and that's one of the things they often mention is helping somebody. Or if I ask them, "What did you do today that was helpful to somebody else?" They usually can say something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they do like that, and it's wonderful to see because there's a lot to praise about that. Just like you were saying, there's a lot
Mhm.
of positive uh, behavior with that,
Right.
and a huge impact on others.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it makes others feel included and important and valued.
Definitely.
Yeah. Um, so then on the next column, let's it's a what is the skill you need to practice, and what are there, if any, what are the lagging skills? So I just made up the example, like I said, of math facts. And so if I already know that the child, for example, has a difficult time persisting, it's hard, I don't know how to do it, I don't want to do it, or they start and then they're done after one or two problems because it's hard to sustain the focus, or they don't feel confident, or lots of times what I see is, let me just get it done. They don't really care what it looks like, or if they understood it, like, just do I just put a two here? What do I do? And they just want to get it done. But all of those, again, are signs that there's some skills that are not in place. So here is a list. It's not a complete list, but that it is some of the things that I think about when I see a child struggling, because I truly believe that every child will do what they can. They want to do the best they can. And so I always assume that they're doing what they can do. And if they aren't doing it, or they're having any of these signs that they are feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, whatever, then I feel like it's my job to figure out why. So here are some things I look at. So do they even understand, especially what the teacher is saying? Because usually that's in a larger group and it's not the same as one-on-one. So that can be hard. Sensory processing, again, like how's your body? Can you sit up tall, and or are you floppy, or kind of like what you were saying, Joe, is like, oh, the body language of that we can see the sensory systems are not working the way that you would expect. They might be hypersensitive to the sound, or they might be sitting next to somebody who's in their space a lot, or touching them or poking at them or something like that. And it can feel overwhelming to kids. And then, of course, so much of homework or doing anything at school requires motor output. So you have to write the answers down, even if it's math and writing numbers down, still have to write it down. And that aspect of figuring out, like, what does a five look like? And I have to look up on the board to find it. And then I have to figure out how to make it, especially like kindergarten level, they're still learning. And so there's a lot of extra work that can go into just putting a number five down on the piece of paper. And postural control, we talked about that a little bit. A lot of kids have very wobbly bodies. They're they have difficulty sitting on the carpet. They get squirmy. It's difficult for them. And sitting in a chair, they're often slouched sort of backwards or leaning forward like that because it's hard to sit up tall against gravity. And then language processing. So did you understand the difference between the two words I said? If you were doing rhyming, for example, did you hear a difference between can and man? Well, that's a pretty clear difference. But what if it was man and nan? Can they hear that difference? So that can make understanding what the directions are hard for kids. And then communication, just are they willing to talk about or ask questions, and what is their ability actually to articulate what they're thinking? Because even if they can say, I don't know how to do this, or I'm bored, or this is stupid, or whatever, it's often that they can't tell you what they think is hard about it. So again, that's why I create this list and think about these things in my head, like what could be making it so hard for them. And it's really, kids can't figure those things out. We have to figure it out. Sometimes if I ask, is it because of one of these things put into kid language, they can say yes or no. And when they can answer those questions, they're very clear about it and very honest, and it's really helpful. And then the cognition, like by the time a child's in third or fourth grade, if they're still struggling with reading, then when they have to open up their history books or their social studies books or science books, they're really struggling because now it's content. And I'm sure you've heard, Joe, that saying, in the first 3 years of school, it's learning to read. And then after that, it's reading to learn. And so if kids are doing both, learning to read still and reading to learn, it can easily be overwhelming for them. So then confidence, of course, kicks in. Like, I don't feel confident. Of course, why wouldn't you avoid doing something if you didn't feel confident, if you didn't feel competent either, because of some of these lagging skills? And then self-advocacy, like that's not often taught, but it's really important for kids to be able to speak up and say, I need a little more time, or can you explain that again? I didn't understand it. But a lot of kids aren't willing to do that. It'd be embarrassing, or they don't even know to ask. They don't even think, oh, I don't really understand what you're saying. And then they get to their desk to do the work, open their books, and like, I don't know what to do. And then they sit, and the teacher thinks, oh, either is it like he's not paying attention or he doesn't understand it. It can be confusing for someone to know what's going on. So that's why these questions in our heads can be helpful. Self-awareness, again, a lot of kids are not aware of things that they're doing. They're not paying attention to the fact that, well, the teacher's speaking to the whole class, but you're playing with the dirt on the rug. Because I see the kids doing that. They find a piece of gravel or something there and playing with that and get engaged and interested in that. They're trying to sit and do what the teacher's asking them to do. And that's a way that can help them. But then what are they picking up from the teacher who's sitting maybe a little bit of a distance from them, where it's not one-on-one? Because when I work with kids, I always make sure I'm no farther than their arm's length from them to make sure I have their attention, because otherwise I feel like they could be listening to anything in the environment. And then sometimes it's just hard to shift from one activity to another activity. And they get in the zone with something, and then they have to suddenly stop and move on to something else. That transition can be difficult. Um, then problem solving skills. It's one of the top things that I um, talk to with parents about the value and the importance of that, because if they believe that they can solve problems, that builds confidence, that builds self-esteem, that builds that idea that I can see myself solving this problem. It's not going to be too hard for me. So that future self, that future thinking, oh, I've solved problems like this before. I can do this one too. So practicing, not necessarily just in academic activities, but in all kinds of ways, comes up all the time. And as parents, we tend to say, oh, do this, and we solve the problem for them. Whereas they really can solve most problems that come up in their lives. And then also just independence. How independent are they? Can they get their own shoes and socks on at an age appropriate level? Or are they dependent on you? And because it's a lot of work to learn to put shoes and socks on. And lots of times it's easier for parents to say, oh, we're running late, let me put them on for you, versus a child struggling through because there's time to sort it out and get the heels lined up and all of that. It still can be really hard to have those skills that other kids at that age are able to do because they are finding things in general easier for them. So that's a lot. Joe, do you have any comments so far on just half of that? You're muted, Joe. We still can't hear you. There. No, I don't know. I can't hear you. I'll let you figure it out and I'll go on and come back. So in another column, resilience, just how easily can you bounce back from an upset? Many of the kids I work with, an incident, small or big, can stay with a child hours, days, and later. And because sometimes it's because it's not really resolved for them in their mind. They don't know what to do with it. Maybe they haven't shared it with somebody. So it just kind of lingers and stays in that emotional backpack that gets uncomfortable and heavy. And and then there's something called praxis or motor planning, which is knowing how to do something. It can be knowing how to approach a teacher to ask for help. It can be knowing how to join a group of kids. It can be knowing how to write that number 5. It can be how to put those socks on. Anything that's how. It's usually a big factor in many of the challenges that I see that kids are struggling with. And then persistence, we talked about that a little bit already. Are you interested in figuring it out, taking the time? Like, you get that sort of burst of, I did it because you persisted. And then integration of reflexes, that's a complicated one to explain, but they're a little bit like developmental milestones, but they're even more foundational than that. And that's a little bit more complex for this talk today, but there are things that do make it harder for kids to hold the body up against gravity, for kids to be able to use their eyes in ways that are helpful for them for reading and for writing. And there are reflexes even about attention for them that we can work on to help them mature and make things easier for kids. And without the integration of those reflexes, kids do go into fight or flight. So part of the purpose of working on integrating those reflexes is to calm down the nervous system. And then automaticity. So I always, when I think of this word, I always think of learning to drive a car and how tense my body was and trying to remember all the things you had to learn and then practicing enough to the point that I got used to it and it wasn't stressful for me. I had practiced it enough that really so many things were automatic. So we all have had, I'm sure, the experience of driving and then sort of like, oh, 15 miles down the road, how did I get here? That was fast. And yet we were still monitoring what was going on about it, but we were on automatic. Or we get in the car and we start driving to work, for example, like, oh, today's Saturday, I'm not going to work. I have to change my route, that kind of thing. And emotional control, of course, is a huge thing. That's one of the dysregulation. Most people that I'm working with now understand that term. And it's such a perfect word to explain. Like, a child doesn't have the coping strategies to know what to do. And often it sort of builds in them until it spills over. And then that's what Joe was saying about crying in the classroom or other areas that let us know the child's not really available for learning. Self-control, that's one that, can you not blurt out? Can you keep your hands to yourself? Those kinds of things. Sometimes those are immature, not being silly in the classroom, not saying potty words in the classroom, those kinds of things are self-control. But if you're having to remember, oh, I'm not supposed to say potty words, then some of your brain is being taken up thinking about that. And now there's less available to listen to the teacher or to think through or to persist or to do any of these other things. And then flexibility, that's a little bit having to do with transitions, but also can you if the teacher says, oh, wait, I made a mistake. Actually, we're going to do this instead. Can you switch gears and be flexible? Or if a friend says, we're going to let's play tag. And then halfway, like after a little bit, the group says, oh, we're not going to play tag anymore. Let's go over here and play football. Can you shift and go with the crowd and be okay with, like, oh, I didn't get to play all the things I wanted to do with tag, but move on with the group? And of course, attention focus, most people understand that. Multitasking, again, it depends on the circumstances. Sometimes I want kids to think about only one thing. And sometimes multitasking is more like, can you self-monitor your behavior and think about playing a game? And that can be really, really hard for kids because they get so excited about the game that they forget about, are they following the rules? Are they keeping their hands to themselves? And then working memory, if you have to write a paragraph, can you remember how to start? When you start, can you keep in mind where you're going and how you're going to get there? And while you're doing that, can you take a pause to try to figure out how to spell a word? And can you remember to put the capitals and the periods in? Those kinds of things are working memory. Takes a lot on us, on our brains, to hold that information, but we have to be able to hold it while we're doing something that's a part of a bigger thing. And then the next one on there is time management. Can you self-monitor and notice if you're doing your work, or are you daydreaming? Are you looking around at what other kids are doing? Are you poking at the child next to you, or doing things that are, then suddenly you realize the teacher says 5 minutes and then it's time for recess, and then you hurry and get it done. And then stress balance, again, sort of what we talked about. Are you getting a balance of sleep and playtime and exercise? And then planning, like, do you know how to plan a paragraph, for example, with the beginning, three parts in the middle, and a conclusion? That can be really hard, and that's partly executive functioning, but it's also a lot more than that as well. And then organization, like I see organization on a page, if it has lines on it, kids can do fairly well with that, but without lines or without, like a lot of times kids have to label something on a picture, the label the parts of a plant. And that's where kids can't organize that space easily sometimes. And the writing will be very like huge letters or really tiny letters, varying, inconsistent, that kind of thing. But the structure of the lines helps them be able to do it in a different way. So, Joe, do you want to see if we can hear you now?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Oh, great. Yeah,
I'm
good,
back.
good.
I had to change out
Oh,
some wires.
okay, well, so we got all through that section. What do you see at school with all those skills?
Um, I think, well, since I only teach like one part of, teaching technology to the kids and to the younger kids, and they're very eager. They just love working with technology. And a lot of the times, like I said earlier, it's just like, they get frustrated with certain, if it's, I'd like to challenge them, and
Mhm.
just like kind of push it a little bit. I don't want them to just, circle this, or, what is this? I'm pointing to something on,
Yeah,
on the screen.
yeah.
Um, with the older kids, um, what I really saw a lot of was the resistance, and they didn't want to participate. And I think where the younger ones, you can tell with their body language, you can, with the older ones, like maybe sixth, seventh, eighth grade, a lot of it was just like a lot of arm crossing
Mm,
and a lot of defiance, which is so bizarre to me, because when I was a student, that was like unheard of. And but maybe it was just me. It's like, obedience and respect and all that kind of stuff, which I
mhm,
think a lot of it is kind of missing in the schools right now. Um, but yeah, the self-control, the attention, the focus, the multitasking, those are all skills, like I could tell, like from TK at least until third grade, you can see the progress, the
mhm,
progression of, they're really getting like the hang of certain things. And by fourth grade, just they're responsible. They know
mhm,
when I'm
mhm.
coming in, they're ready.
Oh,
They
cool.
have all their Chromebooks out, they're ready to learn.
Oh, that's great.
So it's really refreshing to see, at least at my school, um, how they take it on. Like, my word is always like, they take ownership, and
Yeah.
they really do. And the teachers are great too. They really kind of implement that in their classroom too, just to say, okay, Mr. Bauman's going to be coming here in 5 minutes. What do we do? And so, yeah, I'll go get the Chromebooks. They're ready for me, and they're ready for me to teach them right when I get there.
Uh-huh. That's great. That's great. That makes everything easier for everyone when that's happening. So that's great to hear that you're seeing that. Um, so then we go to the next column, and this is previewing with the child what to do and helping the child know what would the finished product look like. How do we know when we're finished? A lot of times I'm working with children of any age, and they just like we're playing a ball game together, just throwing and catching, and I'm done, and they start walking away, not checking like, did you want to play anymore? Of course, some of these things that I don't expect them to know, but I'm teaching them. But some of it is there's not an idea of an ending. And with throwing and catching a ball, there's not really, except an agreement like we're done. But when if you are building a making a puzzle, then there's an ending to that. We all know when that's done. Or if you're lacing beads on, here's 10 beads to lace on. We know when they're done. But that's a big piece, I think, for kids to have a sense of this is what done looks like. So whenever possible, like sometimes I'll have a child and showing me a writing assignment that they've done, maybe a fourth grader, and they've written 3 sentences. And if I ask the teacher for a representative sample for someone else in the classroom, they've written 3 paragraphs. And so I try to use that finished product from another child to help them understand what their goal is. And I sort of take apart that maybe 1 paragraph of that and say, what did they include in this paragraph? And how can we do something similar? So that really matters a lot, especially in writing assignments. Art projects also, this is what the end product will look like, especially if one that has been cut out and pasted and all of that. This is what a step-by-step activity will look like when we're finished. So now let's go through the steps. So that can help kids a lot. So when we're thinking about getting started on an activity, we want to like think about, well, as this in this example, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to think about the environment, make sure it's quiet because interruptions can be difficult for the child. We'll have a plan for taking a break. And these are some of the things that are in the journal that goes along with the Tijuana Mañana book, but also it's some of the things that Tijuana says, oh, I could do these things. And then we could ask what will be helpful to the child. Do you want me to stay with you? They have strong opinions about that. No, I want to do it on my own. Or yes, please sit with me. Generally, they want me to sit with them. And sometimes they even want me to sit with them over their parent because I think they think that sometimes I can help them along because just experience. And and then I'm going to be watching for signs of stress. And we've talked about some of those already. And so I can have a child all ready to go, but at some point they might hit a wall and I have to figure out what that is, but always be watching for it. So then, so we're all prepped for it. Previewing really makes a difference. And it's one of the main things that I hear from parents is that if they tell the child what to expect, things go much more smoothly. If they forget, things are harder. So that's an important step when you're starting to do homework, for example, as in this example. And then thinking about being clear on what the goal is. And this is something I often share with parents too. If you're doing a writing assignment, there's probably 30 things that are actually going on when I'm just writing a sentence with a child. And not meaning things going on, but I mean components that go into writing a sentence. I have to go through that list in my head and think, what is my goal in this assignment? Is it pencil grip? Is it letter formation? Is it what kind of support do I need? But I have to be very clear. So I often try to make sure parents are, I suggest that parents really think about what they want, what the goal of the if in this case math facts, that's a pretty clear goal. We're going to spend 15 minutes practicing them. And it could be a variation of flashcards. It could be hands-on with manipulatives. It can be matching games, like memory games with numbers. It can be anything that you do in that 15 minutes. And the more you vary it and keep the kids' interest, because oh, I've had enough practice of the flashcards. Okay, we're ready for the next step. So having things in mind of what you're going to do next so that the child doesn't say, I'm done with this, and you say, oh, what should I do next? But that you know what's going to be next and it's right there at your fingertips because you've prepared for it. And then the next one, we can go back to the columns, the little cheat sheets to talk about strategies. So the example here that I put was vary the practice, like I just said, and add in manipulatives and games, make it fun, and make sure you stick to the 15 minutes because sometimes it's tempting, like this is going well. Maybe we can do a little bit more, but it usually doesn't go very well. Like the number of minutes and stick to that. So on section C here, it's a little shorter. Some strategies that you might try. Tijuana had some of these. And in Mission Control, A Big Feelings Adventure, there's a bunch of that on the website of strategies, but also Joseph in that story talks about some of the strategies he has that he can pick from when he gets upset about something. These are some that are common among the kids if I give them ideas, or they sometimes come up with these ideas. So counting like Tijuana, kids truly do like counting by tens. They think that they really like to feel proud of being able to do that, or even counting to 100. I can count to 100. They really like that. Taking deep breaths. Sometimes kids have a very negative connection with that idea, and sometimes kids are okay with doing it. A hug goes a long way with many kids. Singing a song, just again, sort of taking a break. Um, Kids say that if they go and read a book, they're more ready to come back to the task. And just any kind of break, exercise break, anything, get a drink of water break, whatever. Having a lovey there to help sort of get through the challenge. A lot of kids like to take something that feels comforting to them when they know they have to do something difficult at the table where they're doing fine motor work. You can change the channel. Just if this isn't working, like go ahead and switch to do something different. The words, just talking about it can help. Adding some sensory activities like kinetic sand, for example, kids like that. Getting a balloon out and playing um, volleyball with the balloon, or keep the balloon up in the air, or do soccer with the ball with the balloon, like in a crab walk position, something like that. Physical activities, that's an idea that I just said, but it's a way to engage with the child if you do it together and you're trying to connect with the child in order to be able to feel like there is a connection when you go to do the work. And mindfulness, some kids are getting quite a bit of awareness about that in school and seem to be open to that and know a lot about it. Maybe even yoga poses that might go along with that. And sometimes kids have in their homes a little calm corner where it just feels comforting to them, and they know that they have peace in there and that somebody's not going to interrupt them, and they come out when they're ready. And then affirmations. In this book, Tijuana Mañana, there's some affirmations in there. I can do hard things when I'm calm. And there are lots of different things about affirmations that are available for kids. And then self-talk, being able to say, I've done it before, I can do it again. That's one a lot of kids do take in and feel like if they can remember another time that they were successful, they can remember that, okay, that I did get through that. It was okay. I did learn something from it. And sometimes visualizing what's that going to be like. And maybe an adult can help the child kind of visualize and tell the words, or they can draw something that will help them with being able to do the task that's hard. And arts and crafts can be just something that they can take a break about and do. And then they can make something fun out of something that they don't like. And that's a big one for kids too. They just want to make it fun. If it feels fun to them, they'll do it. And then, of course, bubbles is another way of doing something like taking deep breaths, but it's more fun. And doing something with somebody else always helps. Movement helps. And again, just making all of that something fun. If you can combine all that, it's the most winning choice. So, Joe, do you make these suggestions to kids or see kids come up with these ideas on their own, or these kids who are helping others, do they give tips like this, or what do you see at school?
Yeah, I mean, they get tips from, it's kind of funny, they talk. So if it's a very fun project, what's fun for me at least to see is like they're into it and they're helping one another, and they'll go from like one table to another. And um like I mentioned earlier, was like, you can tell by body language, but sometimes the kids pick up on it.
Mm.
And especially if it's a close friend,
Uh-huh.
and um they'll help one another without even me saying, hey,
Mm.
Johnny, can you help Timmy, kind of
Yeah.
thing. They just
Yeah.
do it on their own. So um but I put my, sometimes it gets a little bit too rambunctious, where they
Yeah.
get so excited
Uh,
that they're just kind of, okay, everyone's getting a little squirrely now, so let's everyone like just kind of, let's bring it down to a low roar here, and let's just get a little bit more focused.
yeah.
So but yeah, I only get them, when I was teaching them, I would only get them for about 45 minutes to 15 minutes twice a week. So they always look forward to it.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
it was fun, and then um they're all excited. Like when you said feel proud, yeah, that was the one thing. It's like I did it, and they would come
Yeah.
up to me. It's like, it's just right, and they're all constantly getting up to make sure. It's like, okay, they just want that approval.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
it started off hard, but now they finally get it. Now they're on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but even the older kids too. It's like when we got into coding, um, they're, I gave them a certain, a goal. And but then some of the students, they would just go beyond what beyond what I could teach them. And then
Uh-huh.
they're doing something that it's like, I don't know what that is. but so, but it was encouraging to see that they wanted just to keep going. So, but some students, you just see they're just as like such a mixture, it's not hit or miss, but they all work at a different pace. But
Yeah.
you just have to work with them, just so they feel, at least my goal was just for them to feel a little bit confident.
Well, and that's mindset you're talking about too. That growth mindset that you're seeing with the kids. Like, I could do this. I bet I could do this too.
Yeah, definitely.
Wonderful to see. So going back to our chart here. So I didn't put it in here, but one of the things I sometimes do is talk with kids after we've gone through some of these things and they're clear about what to do. I ask them to circle 1, 2, or 3. How do you think it's going to be? And lots of times they do circle like 3, it's going to be really hard. And then when we come back to it after the job is done, I ask them to look again at it, and it always goes down. So their estimation of how hard it's going to be is always inflated. And the reality of it is that it's always less than they thought. And part of that is the right amount of support for them to be successful, because I really want to see that they can be successful. So I give more support or less support depending on what's needed in order for them to be successful. Because all kids can be successful with the activity. eh, Might have to be modified a little bit to be at their level, might need to be more supported, provide more help by the adult, but they can get the job done if some of these things are added into the task. And I'll talk also in just a few minutes about things that can make it easier. So I have one here for the child to rate and one for the parent to rate. And these again are only after the session, after the task is done. And so I just made it up that the child feels like it was hard, but doing it with an adult made it feel easier and more fun. And then the adult response to it was, oh, it seems to know, the child seems to know what to do, but hard to make it stick. So needs lots of repetition. And but a hug made him smile when we were all done. So if we look over here again at these charts, D, some examples that show signs of progress, that it really matters to tell kids, I noticed this. So I think a lot of people understand that if you just say, oh, great job, the kids don't really know what to try again next time. They don't even know what they did well. But if you're very clear about what they did, and you can share that with them, then you see more willingness to try it again because they have an idea. So, some examples of progress: if you can see the child feels encouraged and willing to do like what you said, Joe, like go above and beyond, or they feel proud of themselves. A lot of kids I work with don't have that connection with that feeling of proud of themselves. But when they do accomplish something that they thought was going to be hard for them, they do get some kids get a giant smile on their face and jump up and down and show their mom or their dad what they did. And they really do show that they're encouraged and they're proud and ready to do it again. Um, the idea of, does the child now believe he can do it? Look what you did. Let's post this on the fridge and then pull it down next time you have something similar to do and say, this is what you did last time. Kids forget quickly what they accomplished. So bringing it down, the visual really helps. Like, you did this before. We're going to do the very same thing as last time. And maybe you do a little bit less support because now they understand it more, but just maybe a little bit less support so that they feel like, oh, I can do it. And then at the end, you can say, and guess what? You did this part all by yourself. I didn't need to give you any help because you've practiced enough to understand that. And then some kids will start thinking, oh, it's getting easier. It's getting done faster because they're not having to break everything down into steps. There's some automaticity is kicking in. And again, like on the staircase that you drew, Joe, with the picture frames and then unveiling them, one of them was, oh, it's starting to feel a little fun. And kids actually will say that sometimes. And then they also will say or act surprised that they got something done. So those are things that build confidence. Those are also things that contribute to having a growth mindset. Um, and then listen, getting used to doing something. I mentioned that earlier. That makes it easier for kids. They may feel like it's hard, but they're doing it. That's a sign of progress. If they're feeling safe, like this isn't going to be too much for me, I can handle this. Or if we can relate to the character, it's that I think that's how Tijuana Mañana felt. Is that how you're feeling too? And then the level of stress or anxiety that they're having, maybe you see less of that as a sign of progress, or they need less support. Just you, like I said already, they don't need you to do quite as much for them. And then finally, thinking about, so that's the evaluation aspect, and then thinking about, so what should I repeat? What should I avoid the next time? So should I do, so in the example, I should do more of the same. I should keep it light. I want to remember that games make it easier. And then maybe instead of just making it all games, I might throw in some writing. All right, I'll write 2 + 3. You write the answer this time. And maybe I make sure that the number 5 is right there for them to see. Or maybe I trace it for them. Maybe they trace it and I outline it or something. And so ways that you can identify what worked and didn't work and know what to do next time could be like, okay, I'm going to repeat it exactly the same way again. It just needs more practice. Or I can add a little demand or decrease a little bit of the demand. I can make it easier, like taking turns doing it, or tracing, like I just said, or copying instead of actually doing the whole writing from scratch. I can add visual supports. I can simplify the task. I can provide some organization, like I talked about, some lines that can help, maybe dividing it into 6 boxes on the page, one for each math problem, something like that. You can use positive reinforcement. It can be yourself as a reward. Like when we finish this, we're going to go make cookies, or we're going to go for a walk and look for frogs or worms because it just rained last night, those kinds of things. Manipulatives, especially if it's something like math, but even if it's reading, there are a lot of ways to make it hands-on. And then adding in breaks. A lot of kids like to have breaks like frequent. Like I'm just going to write one sentence and I want to break. I'll do 5 math problems and I want to break. Short attention, but that's well how they know that's what's going to be the easiest way for them to get it done. And then sometimes saying it out loud instead of writing it down, or doing it with manipulatives instead of writing it down, can be ways to do things alternatively. And then breaking it into smaller steps, it's a huge, huge help. Like we don't have to think about all this. So the adult breaks it down into, we're just going to do the first step. And that then sort of assess, or can we go on to the second step or not? But do all the things that we talked about in the chart for just one step of it. And then it's not the 10 steps that need to be done. That makes it feel overwhelming. A whole page of math problems, a whole page of words that are dense on the page, those things like make kids say, I don't even want to start. And of course, we're talking about a lot of kids who have lagging skills. Many of the kids I'm working with, this isn't true about all kids, but something out of this is true about all kids. Just you can grade it to be less or more than what I'm talking about here. But we all, I mean, as adults too, we all can relate to these things like, oh, taxes, oh my gosh, I wish somebody would just do it for me, right? And that's probably the equivalent for kids when they have to do something hard, because it takes so much time, it takes so much brain power, it takes so much money to pay somebody else to do it, but even to prep for ourselves before we give it to somebody else, if that's the route we decide to go. And just thinking about, oh, that expense, do I want to do it again next year? We actually go through all these steps in doing taxes ourselves. And then deciding how to support lagging skills and how much do you need to do, and then just following a routine, getting used to something. You do it at the same time every day, you do it the same way every day, at the same place every day. Kids like predictability, and so those are all ways that can help facilitate success. So Joe, you might be muted again, or we're not hearing you. if you wanted to comment before we end. We can't hear you again. Uh-uh. Well, I'm not sure what happened again, but um, this and when Tijuana Mañana comes out, which we're expecting in a few months, this will be on the website as something that parents can access on their own as a support for reinforcing messages from the book. And so I think that this is a great starting place for people to to help their child move from Tijuana Mañana, I don't want to deal with this, to okay, I feel like I can do this. So hopefully all of these little charts that are quite dense, speaking of which, and then there's a blank one to do your own. So hopefully that'll be helpful to people and help encourage children to do like Tijuana, be like Tijuana. That's the whole idea of the book. Your brain's there to protect you, and there's an adult there who can be the upstairs brain for you and help you access that yourself. And these are some ways to do that. So thanks for being here and sharing your thoughts, Joe, today. It was very valuable to have you. I appreciate you being with us. So we'll be back again same time next week with another lesson. And it's going to be more about the journal next time and how to use
Okay.
that.
That sounds
Okay.
good. All
Oh,
right.
good. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Sorry about that.
That's no worries.